Hey guys, welcome back to the Will of the Maker. As you can see, I'm in the van. It's been a little while since we've been in here, had a baby. So that came first, getting the nursery ready and everything else, and making sure she's okay. She's a perfectly healthy little girl, about a month old now, and so it's time to get back into the van. And so we need a second row in our van. Now this is something that we've been planning for since the beginning. And so one of the first things we need to do is get the seat installed, the second row seat. We got one of those folding seats. Bellagio from Freedman Mobile Seating is the actual company name. They have a few different brands that they use depending on what their customer is. But the folding seat, that's pretty popular amongst van lifers because, well, it folds up and gets out of the way. Now, the issue is, and I've seen this on tons of vans, and it kind of scares me, people install their seats on top of the floor installation, like the foam, and that's scary. You want these things to be installed metal to metal, nice and secure, because in the event of an accident, it's going to be a huge weight that's going to basically pivot like this, and you want that to be as secure as possible to prevent that from happening. And so if you install it on like foam insulation board with plywood and stuff on top of that, it's just not a safe solution. It's not tested. Even though the seat itself is tested, it's pull tested, everything, if the installation isn't good, the seat's no good. Luckily, another company, Fenton Seats, just came up with a installation kit, and I got one of them. I just got lucky on a business trip. They were there, and I got to talk to them about it. And so I'm going to start working on that. And so basically, it is a big, thick piece of half-inch sheet metal that's has holes and things drilled into it. And the thing is, this is a fully tested system with the seat on this kit, on this bracket, installed in the van, fully FMVSS pull tested and everything. So it's basically as safe as you can get. Let me show you a little bit more about it. These are the instructions that you can download from them. So this is basically the bracket, if you will. It's pretty heavy. Thick, half-inch thick steel. You can see it's patent pending from Fenton Seats. And basically you put it, where you want it to be. You drill holes into these outer ones, install that onto the frame, and then you install the folding seat onto these threaded holes here. And then you have a nice and secure seat system. When I first got this, started playing with it, I noticed there's really not a good way to have it so that the holes line up without a gap here. And so when I first got this, I'm really happy that we have this. However, it's a universal system, meaning it's not great for anything in particular in terms of installation. And so what that means, and what my point is, that where these holes line up, like where you might want to actually have the seat, there's a big gap. So there's a gap here now. So in here, if I stick my finger in here, there is, let's see if you can see my finger sticking through there. That means that the bolt is going to clamp down here and possibly squeeze the metal floor up and not get a good, safe torque on the bolt. So I contacted them, and what I'm going to do is, once I figure out the exact position, I'm basically going to build up spacers with a bunch of washers. I got a bunch of fender washers. They're nice and wide, and if needed, I also got some just standard washers that are a little bit thicker and narrower in case where it lines up needs a narrower washer. But I asked them about that, and they said that is perfectly fine. They actually sent me a picture of how they tested it on the van, and they actually tested it on top of plywood. Now they do also specify, don't put it on top of a foam board. It's not safe. I guess plywood is okay, just straight plywood on top of this, but the problem with putting on the plywood is it's the same issue with the gap underneath here between the bolt and the floor of the van. When you're tightening something, you don't want any gap in it. That means if you have a gap, you don't have a tight connection, and it'll loosen over time. Obviously, that's not a good situation to have, which is why I am doing the washers as a spacer, which I asked them about it and they fully approved it. So that's basically what we are going to be doing over the next course of however long it takes me to do this, as I have a full-time job and a newborn, and those come first. So if I wear a bunch of shirts, I'm doing this when I can. So this is the general area of where we want it to be. second row behind the first row of seats. These are swivel seats, as you've seen in my other videos. One of the next things I need to do is get the seat in here, which is a very heavy seat. And I have some ramps and a dolly. Hopefully I can manage it. So let's see how that goes. Alright, so the seat is on the dolly. I have a little ramp up into the ramps. It's fairly steep, unfortunately, and this thing does weigh quite a bit. So, we'll see. Ah, the seat is finally in the van. That's nice. Alright, so the seat is now sitting on the bracket. I'm going to get the hardware and quickly just finger tighten those screws on just so it's one piece, and then we can work on figuring exactly out where we want to put the seat. I'm just putting these on loosely for now, but you do put the split washer and then the standard flat washer in the hole, and then you tighten them down. One of the things about this installation is obviously you have to drill through the holes, and it just so happens to be that the fuel tank is basically right underneath that. So eventually when I do go to drill the holes and fully install this thing, I'm going to have to lower the fuel tank because I obviously don't want to punch a hole in the fuel tank. And they also do say in the instructions, if the fuel tank is underneath it, depending on where you install this in your van, to make sure that the bolt ends are covered in some way so that they don't puncture the fuel cell. So keep that in mind. We'll see how it looks when I get to it, but until then, keep watching. Even though this is just loosely placed here, just seeing it in the van is incredibly exciting. It's been a while. This has been sitting in the garage for months and just waiting for the opportunity to get this installed in the van, and I can already tell it's going to be a nice addition. We'll be able to take child with us. This seat, by the way, does have the latch system. In case you're wondering, if you have a newborn who sits in a car seat, it has the latch system for quickly getting the child seat base installed. So yeah, let's figure out where we want to get this thing positioned. So I'm first going to put it down. So I brought my old toolkit here, basically just to act as a rest for when the seat is folded down. Otherwise the whole seat's gonna tip over because it's not going to be balanced. But once it's bolted in, that's not an issue. So let's get to it. There we go. First time with this unfolded in the van. This is not a bad position, actually. I have plenty of legroom now, but when the seat is rotated, we may be locking knees. So I need to check how that position. So you can see with that seat turned around and with me sitting in this position, my knees are about here. Further back, my knees are probably maybe here, which you might say, okay, well that's some space. But the second I move my leg, my feet, our feet are gonna definitely be hitting each other. We'll play some footsie, I guess.
A lot of boring math later.
I think it's time to take the tape off the wall and start laying down a floor pattern just to kind of help give us an idea. The other thing, also, we have the shower pan, so we can put that behind the seat. So right now I have the seat basically how it was where I had originally put it, kind of where I didn't want to put it, but for now, let's see sort of why, and that is there's the shower wall here. This is kind of rudimentary here, obviously. Costco boxes, thank you. But you can see with the seat reclining back, I want to have a little bit of space back there so the seat doesn't rub. But basically, this is kind of the main issue is this space right here, where if we have the seat down, there's not a lot of room to kind of squeeze by here. You kind of have to do the shuffle across. All right, so now I just folded the seat there, and you can see, I hadn't tried this before, the front seat is touching the headrest here. That's not very good because over time they're going to wear each other down. So let's move this chair back maybe half an inch. Okay, so it looks like we may have lost an inch because of this. Now obviously the front seat can move back and forth, but the less chances you have of accidentally bumping the seat because you're not always going to be thinking about how this is going to work, the better. You don't want to damage things if you don't have to. So if you can make it a little bit more foolproof or yourself-proof, that's always a good idea. So you can see here we just have enough daylight in between them.
Several days later.
Okay, so right now everything's kind of just wedged up using some wood, scrap pieces of various wood that I have. This box here is acting as a wall. It's about 1.25 inches thick at the edges, but it kind of bows out. So maybe 1 3/8 inches, maximum 1.5 inches width at the worst part. So I'm going to try and get this down, and it's sort of barely rubbing here, so this means I think as long as this wall is 1 inch or so less, we should be fine. And this is also a good position for where the seat is. When you're looking from the front seat, there's this huge awkward gap right here. So now that's closed. So yeah, so let me get this down. So now from the driver's seat, it looks a little bit more normal. Before there was this huge gap where the seat would basically start on the side of my hand there, on this side, and there's just a big open space here. It's kind of strange. So basically what that leads to is that the bracket here is 6 3/8 of an inch away from this piece of sheet metal right here. The instructions say to have it 6.5 inches from the wall, from any wall, and that's not including this wall, that's including, you know, whatever wall we put on top of here. But if we were to do that, where these holes line up, and I really wish that they made these slots instead of holes, because this is just not great situation here, is that if I were to move this out basically to the next spot where the bolts would be on a flat spot, I would have to move the seat out about 2 inches, and that way this hole will basically be on the pinch weld seam here, which I don't really want to cut into if I can avoid it. I think the middle piece, or the middle hole on the back, will be about here on this flat surface, and then this hole will be on this surface here. So this might be better. So how I have it here, I have a flat surface here, I have a flat surface underneath here, and I have a flat surface here. You don't, no, the reason why I want that is that, you know, with bolts and hardware, you want them to be on flat parallel surfaces, the nut and the bolt head to be parallel with each other. If they're not, it's going to cause the shank of the bolt to bend, to stress in a weird way that you don't want it to do, and it's going to lead to premature failure possibly. So with something like this, you want to avoid that. You want it to be as safe as possible. Now, one of the other reasons why I put the seat where I did is what lurks underneath. Let me show you real quick on top, and then I'll get down below. So from above here, you can see the square section here, where this rib you know, goes down and basically disappears. There's another one right here, And where these parts are approximately where there are cross beams going across the width of the vehicle. And those basically look like U-channels like that. And you can't get to them. If I were to drill through that section and to bolt in there, I can't get into it to tighten it. Let me show you. All right, so underneath the van, these are those channels I'm talking about. You can see the shape of the square here, and then the other one right here. Now, if I were to drill through the middle of that, I would have to drill a huge hole into these cross beams to be able to actually get the socket in there. Remember, the socket is going to be much bigger than the bolt. So you would have to drill a pretty big hole in there, and that's even if it aligns perfectly. So I'd rather just avoid it, and I think where I have it now, basically I could drill, you know, one on this side and one on this side, and I hope that works. I'm gonna have to do more careful measurements, but that's kind of where I am. Now, the main problem right now is this: the fuel tank. So I have to drill into it. Well, not into it, but I have to drill above it. And there's a pretty decent gap here. And I was at first thinking, okay, well maybe I actually 3D printed a little stop, so I could just drill in the tiny little hole, like a pilot hole, and see where it is, and then, you know, judge it from that point. But unfortunately, there are all the fuel lines right underneath here, and I don't want to risk drilling into those. So that means I have to lower the fuel tank. So let's get started on that. All right, so I took some more measurements and thought about it a little bit further and realized something, which is the bracket holes are not necessarily above the fuel tank, which could be a good thing. However, this groove here lines up with the main structural C channel that goes from the front to the back of the vehicle. Now it's about, I don't know, about that thick, or that deep, I guess, of the C channel going up and down. And that's, you know, main structure. Drilling extra holes into that is less than ideal, plus getting everything lined up. Like the hole to put the nut and socket through that C channel, it would basically be 1 1/8 inches in diameter to fit through that C channel to get the nut in here to, you know, clamp down on here. So I have to be very careful with how I line that up, first thing. Second thing is I would also have to remove the fuel tank. So this is where I am at a slight conundrum, and I think I know which way I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna lower the fuel tank, and I'm not gonna drill really big holes into that C channel. So what I'm gonna do is use Rivnuts. They do make 1/2 inch Rivnuts, 1/2 inch 13 by 13. They're coarse thread bolts. And so what the instructions here say is use all 6 of the holes highlighted in red, and then you only do 1 of the ones in the yellow circle. But I think I'm going to use both of the ones in the yellow circle, so instead of using 7 bolts, I'm going to use 8, so I have to get another bolt. And that's because the Rivnuts have a slightly less surface area than the actual nuts would. So to make up for that, I'm going to use that 8th nut and bolt. So hopefully that'll work out in the end. But where I have it, everything is on a flat spot, which is good. So the next thing I need to do is mark where the holes are going to be. Now I 3D printed this little insert which fits right into the bracket, right like this, and that is just the size for a Sharpie to go perfectly down there and mark the exact center of the hole. So that's going to be helpful in getting this thing perfectly lined up. So let's work on getting this thing square and straight and get these holes made. Kind of crazy. First holes in the van. All right, not gonna lie, marking these makes me a little nervous. I don't want to mess it up, but everything seems to be square and in position. So I got my little marker tool here, Sharpie's down there. Let's do it. Of course, the seat is blocking this hole right here, if you can see that. So I have to take the seat off so I can mark that hole so I can drill that hole as well. So let's do that. I also got a piece of cardboard here where I can put the bracket and everything on without scratching the paint up even more than I already have. Less touch up is better. Alright, so this point only sticks out a little bit, and it's not enough to mark this one because this is at a slight slope. So I'm going to just hope for the best here. It's not the best situation right there. It is time to make the first hole. Let's hope this is right. Right here. The first hole. Is that big enough? A little bit bigger. Test for size. Just perfect. Just enough tolerance in there. Burring tool. And I'll get it from the bottom as well. Before I take the tip off, I'll have to do the other ones. So let's do hole number 2. A little bit bigger, but... And hole number 3. So that's a success. Alright, next step is to paint in the holes. I was lucky to find this gloss almond color of the protective enamel. It's pretty close to the color of the van. It's a little bit lighter, but it's pretty close, so not that any of this would be seen, but it's always nice just in case to have something that's similar. So let's get painting.
Three days later.
Alright, so today the mailman was very good to me because he basically delivered everything that I need to finish this off, hopefully. One thing I got were a pack of stainless steel washers. I'm going to grind these away to basically make a spacer underneath the car, underneath the van, to allow for a flat spot for the nut to rest on. But more importantly, he also brought me the Rivnut tool and some 1/2-inch Rivnuts that will go for these 3 holes right there. That's the big holdup right now. So first things first, I'm gonna get this thing more or less level. I'm gonna get it nice and tight, and I'm gonna get a perfect marking for where the Rivnut should be, because with these bolts being flatheads, they self-center in the hole. There's not a lot of room for error. If this is gonna be a fixed Rivnut, it has to be spot on perfect, because you know, of a through hole with the nut on the bottom, there's a little bit of wiggle room you have if it's not perfectly aligned hole. So I have to be very, very careful with that. With that being said, let's get started. Okay, this bolt does. And here. When you don't have somebody to hold the other side for you, you get creative with the Allen wrench here, an extender, to the socket wrench, which isn't long enough, so you put a big socket to fit into the handle to extend it with the extension here, but I don't want it rubbing up against the body panel, so I put a rubber mallet that this would rub up against and wedged it with this piece of 2x2 to keep it in place while I tightened it. MacGuyver, anybody? So I've gotten some of these tight. This one's just a bit of a lost cause right now, but this is why I'm such a stickler for filling these gaps in. I just tightening this one down. I am flexing the washer here. It is completely bent, which isn't a good thing. So yeah, that's why I'm being such a stickler about this. So I add some tape to make this nice and snug fit in there. I have my punch here, which will be also a nice snug fit inside there. And then with that, that's pretty straight. And with that, I have a nice divot. So the next step is to drill the holes for these 1/2-inch Rivnuts. These call for an 11/16 inch hole. I don't have a drill bit that is that size. My biggest drill bit by itself is a 1/2 inch. Just, standard set of drill bits. But I do have my step bit, which is how I drilled all the other holes. But I need to make sure to not go too deep. So I put some tape in there. Hopefully that will help. If nothing else, serve as a visual cue to not go too far. Because if you get the hole too big, these will be loose in it. And, well, they won't be as tight at least. So you want the hole to be as tight on this as possible so that these knurls have as much meat to grip into as possible. So I'm going to very carefully start drilling these holes. Wish me luck. Alright, hole number 1. That looks pretty good. Oh, nope, not quite. Almost there. Maybe the next step up. There we go. Perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Quick deeper. Alright, on to the next hole. Got number 2. Okay, next day, I finally got everything bolted away. As you can see, everything is nice and in here. And so far it's looking good. It's pretty even. 6 7/16 and 6 7/16. So nice and straight, which is good. So now I need to recoat everything, all the paint, and start working on creating the spacer washers for all the bolts. Well, at least a lot of them. So I prepped the surfaces with isopropyl alcohol. I'm trying to touch up all the places where this bracket scratched the paint before. No need to have those areas starting to rust. So now I just need to grab my brush and start filling in all these holes. So next up, I have all these stainless steel washers that I'm going to grind away into thinner shapes to basically fit in all the ridges of the van floor. I'm using stainless steel washers because they won't rust after I grind them down. When you use standard steel hardware that's zinc plated, if you cut it or you grind it or something like that, you take away the zinc plating and it's going to rust on you. So I see a lot of people do that. Be careful, don't do that. Use stainless if you have to do that, or just get the right size part. If you have to do something like what I'm doing, get stainless and you'll be happy about it. It's the next day and the paint is nice and dry, so now we have to install the Rivnuts into 3 of the holes. To do that, I'm going to be using this Rivnut tool. If you've never used a Rivnut, there are a lot of videos online of how to use them. I wanted to use a plus nut because they give better surface area underneath. However, they don't make plus nuts anywhere near this size. In fact, 1/2 inch Rivnuts is basically where these things max out. I think plus nuts were maxing out at maybe 5/16 or 3/8 of an inch. These go up to 1/2 inch, and in fact a lot of the Rivnut insert tools don't even go up to 1/2 inch, and a lot of the ones that do get terrible reviews saying they basically break the handles or something just breaks on these things and they don't work. This one got good reviews, so maybe I'll put a link down below if you want to get one of these. But either way, it's time to install these, so let's get this going. Jesus Christ. A little bit more. little bit more. Hopefully that is nice and in there. I guess the trick is to do it in a few pulls because this requires an insane amount of force. And I have not been going to the gym enough. Now that all the holes are done and everything's in place, I'm going to put the last couple of sheets of Kilmat from before. If you haven't seen that video when I put all this stuff in, make sure you check that out. But I have 2 more sheets of the Kilmat, which I'm going to use along here to, just help with some sound deadening and some insulation. All right, I've ground down a lot of those stainless steel washers. Now basically we just need to get the plate onto the floor. All right, I did the best I could to try and get flat surfaces for the nuts. I think I did pretty good on most of them. This one was sort of just awkward to begin with because of this like triple step here, but that one's sort of extra anyways. It has, the nut is sort of on a flat surface, it's just there's this space here, but that's because it's flat over here on this side, on this little small surface right there, which I can't do anything about. This one is perfect right here, but so I used Loctite and ended up just using standard hex nuts and not the prevailing torque nuts, because when tightening these down I basically got just to the first or second thread on the prevailing torque nut. You can see the damage it's doing. To be able to get this from here to there by hand with somebody holding a small Allen key wrench, even with a socket, it's still an Allen key, it's awkward as heck. It's just not feasible. And so I got the Loctite on the hex nut. Hopefully it should stay. I'm gonna monitor this. I'm gonna monitor all of these. I'll probably mark them with a paint pen or something just to see if they have loosened up over time. But bracket is in. You can see the stack of washers here as a spacer. These are also Loctited and torqued in through the Rivnuts. I did a lighter torque because I don't know how much the Rivnuts can take. But these are nice and flush and flat, which is good. Now the next step is to get the seat on and do that. Almost done. Can't wait. It is finally in place, nice and solid. Some of these bolts took some convincing, but we got them in. Looking good, nice and solid. The base isn't going anywhere. Put some marking down below. I can check the nuts and stuff down below if it ever gets loose. But so far it looks pretty good. And it works. Pull that down. Climb that back, and there we go. We have the second row installed. Feels good. Finally, this is in. Anyways, I am happy that this is finally installed into the van. Overall, I'm sure it'll be a good, system in the end. I think the Fenton seat bracket is a great idea. It's nice to have an option for a safe, tested installation system for these foldaway seats. For our vans, because a lot of people do things that I think is a little dangerous. The Fenton bracket itself, the seat base, I think is a very good idea. I think it's a very good almost product. There's a couple little things to tweak and it will be a great product in the end. Basically, just because this is supposed to be a universal bracket and these vans are all different, the ridges in the floor are all different, instead of having the flat head bolts for installing the bracket to the frame of the car, just use slotted holes. You know, give them an inch or two, inch and a half of movement for the bolts to find a flat spot in the van. Maybe include some spacers or something like that to build up inside like the valley of the ridge, and it'll just make installation so much easier. You'll probably have safer installations in the end. And quite frankly, I know basically the compromise is that you won't have a nice flush system here, but I would much rather have a bolt head sticking up like this and a slot that would allow me to position this exactly where I want it and not kind of compromise with all these different ways that I did. And I'd probably move this out a little bit. You know, there's a lot. It's almost there. I think the slots would really make this a great product. You know, right now it's probably a B. Slots would make it an A. It's almost there. Make that change, and this is a great solution for the van world. So in the end, happy with the solution, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you do consider this product. It is a viable solution. Yeah, I kind of struggled with a lot of the method to install everything, but in the end I got it. I'm pretty happy with how I did it. I think it'll be a safe solution. It's about as good as I can get it. And yeah, if you are interested in doing something like this, highly recommended. Remember, metal to metal, no air, no foam, ideally no wood in between. You'll have a nice safe system. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Hope you enjoyed watching me struggle with getting this thing installed. But if you did, if you want to see what's next, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Obviously, this is still just the beginning. We do have the wool insulation to install, but we may do the flooring next. We don't know, we'll see. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Anyways, leave a like if you like this video. If not, leave it thumbs down, I guess. Do whatever you want. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.